Good morning. My name is Stacy Sanders, and I volunteer with the hospitality team. Please stand for today's reading. The passage today is Matthew 7:24 through 29. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teachings, for he was teaching them as one who had authority, not as their scribes. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Amen. Thank you. Amen. You may be seated. Good morning. So good to see you this morning. Could you turn to someone around you and say good morning, if you don't mind, please? You don't have to say if you don't mind either. It's good to see you today. We are so thrilled that you are here. We're thankful for the reprieve of heat, right? A little bit, correct? Yeah. Hey, it's South Carolina. Hang on. It's going to get hot again, right? Just to say that, let's keep it real this morning. So that's it. But we are thankful to be here as well. Reba and I enjoyed a little time away, and we're back. And so we look forward to our teaching this morning. Today we continue in our series, The Parables of Jesus. Today we are in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, if you grab your Bibles and your devices as we study through this as well. We chose 2 weeks to talk to you about the topic of eschatology. Eschatology is just a very fancy theology word that simply means that of the study of the end, death, and judgment. Isn't that a wonderful topic? Aren't you glad that you're here this morning for that? Yes, we're going to talk about that of the end, death, and that of judgment. So great, isn't it? So we want to talk about this with you and about the end times for a moment. But here's what I want to say to you as we begin this teaching, is that, one, when we talk about those kinds of things and we're on that topic, that many times we want to set our gaze on the future. And I think what we're going to learn as Jesus teaches to us this morning in this parable and the preceding verses as well, that we should also set our gaze on that equally of the present and where we are now. And that's important. Let me explain that to you. Because I've said to you so many times, I'll say it again this morning, that it matters how we live. Understand that. It does matter how you and I live this life. That we have never taught, nor does the Bible teach, this doctrine of escapism. And that is that we continually live just looking forward to the return of Christ, and it really doesn't matter how we live in this life. And that is absolutely contrary to what Scripture teaches us as well. So it does matter how you live. But the thought is this: if we study all of these texts that we find throughout the Bible about the end times and death and the judgment and return of Christ that we have called eschatology or referred to as eschatology, if we study all of that, then, but how profitable is it for you and I to know all of those things, but yet not live in the light of grace and obedience to Christ? How profitable is that for you and I? Because here's what I want to say to you this morning. That readiness is about readiness in our life for that of the end times. Readiness is not just knowing the signs, realize this, but doing the will of the Father. And I underline this because this really is the context for what Jesus teaches in these verses in just a moment. With the right heart while waiting. And I think that's really what we're going to see Jesus talk about in the preceding verses to the parable of the two houses this morning. These words at the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount, and that's what this is. This is the Sermon on the Mount, I think, speak to that thought that my preparation for the second advent does not happen at the second advent. That's not when I prepare for that at all, but it takes place before that day, and it takes place now. But I want to say something to you because we're going to talk a lot about works, as Jesus does throughout these texts today, and that is that this is not about you practicing obedience so that God will love you more, that you can earn something more from God, that somehow God is keeping points on you, and so that you will reach a point where God accepts you. That's not what we're talking about. You are accepted today, and you are loved by God. So realize that. But I think this is where the correct posture of our heart comes into play as we study these texts this morning. So the reality is this, that I'm not earning a place at the table. That's not it at all as we study these things about works. Jesus paid for my seat at the table on the cross. I'm responding to this great act of love and mercy on his part through redemption in my obedience and my surrender to him. That I'm not saved by works, but I think it is important for you and I to understand, and this is just good theology, that there is a place for those works in my life. And that is that even though I'm not saved by works, yet works are a sign. Works are a proof of my redemptive experience with Christ. So it is important what I do in this world. It is important how I treat my neighbor, how I love people that are sitting in this room, how I conduct myself with ethics and morals and all those kinds of things that we could make a long list about. It is extremely important how we live this life, but it's not earning something from God that God has already freely given. And at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, which this is what we're talking about this morning, Jesus gives us this very familiar, well, maybe not to everyone, but I think to a lot of people, a very familiar parable about that of the two houses as well. But I wanted to go back because we talked about that parable last summer, but I wanted to go back and preach and teach through the preceding verses to that parable and then end with the parable itself, which we did not do. Because what you're going to find in the preceding verses, that there are two types of sheep, there are two paths, there are two trees, and then he ends with two houses. And I think, though, because this Sermon on the Mount is so familiar to many of us, that we sort of brush over the meaning, is what we do. So I encourage you today to take a moment to kind of brush the dust off of something that might be very familiar to you, and you allow God to speak to your heart as you open your heart to these truths today as well. You say, but Art, I've heard this, I've grown up in church. Again, I'm not lumping everybody in the same category, but I've heard this many times, and so how am I supposed to respond to these words of Jesus that I have heard? That's a great question. Let me show you the response in verse 28. It says, and when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowd was astonished. That's a powerful word. The crowd was astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not their scribes. So how do we respond? How do we know that these words, maybe familiar as they are, how do I know that they're changing my heart, convicting my life, and encouraging me in my growth with Christ? How do I know? And you go back to these words, and it says the crowd was astonished. If you look at the word astonished, it translates into, or from the Greek word, it translates into another word I think is very powerful, and that word is thunderstruck. Isn't that an interesting word, right? I don't know if you've ever used that word before, thunderstruck, right? So the next time that you send like your significant other a card and you want to express yourself to them, you can say to them something like, every time I'm in your presence, I am absolutely thunderstruck, right? Yes, I don't know how that sounds. I'm not sure, because it also translates into the word flabbergasted, right, as well. So what it says to you and I is this: as familiar as these things might be, that as we open our hearts to these words, they are life-changing. They convict us. They challenge us in the middle of familiarity, that they challenge us in so many different ways. Because I think the danger of this is to just lump all of this in, oh, I've heard this before. So brush off the dust this morning for some of you in this room. Not all, but for some of you, maybe a very familiar passage of Scripture. Let's start at verse 15, is where we begin today, chapter 7. Beware of false prophets, he says, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? So here's where we begin this morning. Beware of false prophets, and here is how you will know them. Jesus does not just tell us that there are going to be false prophets that we're going to experience, but he says, hey, this is how you're going to know who they are. This is how you're going to figure all of this out as well. He doesn't just leave us hanging, and that's what I love about this teaching this morning. But we're going to come back to the false prophets in just a moment and talk about them. But here, I think here's an important part and a piece of this puzzle, and that is this, that there is more here than just you becoming fruit inspectors. And I think when you look at this for a moment, you think, oh, that's what this is about, right? This is for me to tell who's the real thing and who's not, and I can inspect fruit. There's more to this teaching this morning than just you and I becoming fruit inspectors. Go back to verse 16. Here's what he says. You will recognize them by their fruits. Excuse me. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So every healthy tree bears good fruit, but the diseased tree bears bad fruit. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. So here's verse 19. We talk about, well, what about eschatology, the end times, the study of death and that of judgment? And well, here it is. This is a judgment text. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down, thrown into the fire. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. So I stopped at that verse 20, and I want to talk about that for a few moments with you. Thus, you will recognize them by their fruits. But it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not, because when you look at who Jesus is talking about, he says that they're prophets and they are sheep. So it's not going to be as easy as it sounds for you and I to do that. That there are two trees, one bearing good fruit, one bearing bad fruit. There are two houses, one built on the rock, the other built upon sand. There's two spiritual approaches to God, is what he's saying to you and I this morning. But what I love about this, that Jesus doesn't just leave us hanging when it comes to all of this. He says, I want you to be able to know the truth. I want you to be able to distinguish these things in your own life. Understand that when I see this, I realize that this is the heart of a perfect Father. This is the heart of God, loving, gracious Father, that he doesn't just leave us hanging in the wind kind of as well. He doesn't set us up for spiritual failure. What God does is God is setting us up for spiritual success. Why? Because here is the overwhelming truth. God is not the enemy. Realize this. Understand this, that God is not the enemy. God is not your enemy. I think you have to just take that truth and let it seep down deep into your heart this morning, that God is not the enemy. God, in his loving and gracious approach to us, sets you and I up for spiritual success. So you said good morning to the person next to you. Could you say one more thing to them for a moment? Could you say that to them, God is not your enemy? Could you turn and say that to them for a moment? Good. Now say to them, neither am I, right? Yes. Yes. Oh, that's a redeeming moment for some of you in the room, isn't it? Yes. Wow. It's going to make the car ride home a little more peaceful as well. Because, we don't know what happened in the car on the way here, right? So we understand God is not the enemy. And what he does, look at this. He uses this metaphor of two trees. But here is the thing. So I brought two trees, and I want to use these for a moment and just let you kind of look at them for a second. You say, Mark, they are lemon trees. That is true. I wanted apple trees, but I couldn't find, big enough for everyone to see in the room. So I have lemon trees, and we'll just take the lemons and make lemonade, right? So I know that's awful, isn't it? At least you responded. The first service said they didn't even hear me say it, right? And I wouldn't dare repeat it again, right? So here is the thing. Here is the thing when I think about this, and he gives us this amazing parable, here's the truth, that neither tree is barren, but both trees are fruitful. That's an important part. If you miss that, then you have missed what Jesus is teaching, that neither are barren, both are fruitful. Yet they're difficult to distinguish with each other because they are similar. They're very similar from the exterior. And I think that's the point that Jesus is making with us. So Haley mentioned earlier about fall, and when somebody mentions the word fall, we get all excited, right, about all the things that come with fall. and we think about leaves, and we think about pumpkins, and we think about lemons, right? No, we think about apples, right? Yes, we think about apples as well. It's what we think about. So what some of you are going to do when it gets a little cooler and it gets to be apple season, that you're going to pile all of your family in the family truckster, and you're going to head to the mountains, right, or the foothills somewhere, and you're going to walk out into a fruit orchard, and you're going to pick some fruit, right? Some of you are saying, Mark, I just go to Publix and pick my fruit, right? Well, they have a nice orchard there too. I understand that. But yet, I think when you walk into a fruit orchard, it's not difficult to determine the healthy tree from the unhealthy tree. Well, what do you mean? Well, I think it's simple, right? You just look at it and you say, well, that tree doesn't have any leaves on it, so it's not healthy. And if it has leaves on it and there are no fruit on it as well, then you know for sure that it's an unhealthy tree. That's not this parable. You see, this parable is not about one tree that bears fruit and another tree that does not bear fruit. That's not the parable at all. Look at verse 18. I want this to really sink in because this is really the hinge pin for this teaching this morning. A healthy tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a diseased tree bear good fruit. They both are bearing fruit. The challenge then for you and I is what? To determine which is good fruit and which is bad. So I'm going to taste them to see which is good and which. No, you can't do that. Can I tell you why? Because the word for bad, you know what it is? It's not sour, it's not rotten. The word for bad is the same word for poisonous as well. The very same word. So no, we can't do that. So when I look at this, just as the two houses look alike in the parable, Jesus is building a parable for the foundation of our life this morning. But Jesus isn't talking about, as I see this and I realize the characters that he's laying out prior to this parable, that I don't believe that Jesus is really talking about good people versus bad people. Because remember, when he talks about the false prophets, it says that they appear to be what? Well, they appear to be sheep, is what it says. And if you were to research throughout the New Testament, when Jesus uses the term sheep, he is most of the time, almost all the time, referring to who? Us. It's what he's doing. The people of God is who he refers to. Can I show you a text? Thank you. John chapter 10. Here it is. I am the good, what does he say? Shepherd. What do shepherds do? They shepherd what? Sheep. Very good. You guys are so intelligent. So here we go, right? I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I will lay down my life for the, what is the word? Sheep. There it is. So this is not necessarily a text about that of good people versus bad people. No, that's not it. Because when you look at these, he calls them prophets. So what that means is they are teachers. They're faithful. They're fruitful teachers. They're not atheists, is who they are. But they are sheep, or at least they appear to be sheep. They appear to be sheep to the naked eye. So I wrote something, and I want to share this with you. I put this in my journal this week. It's rather long, but let me read this to you for a moment. It says, the darkest force, the most wicked work of the enemy, is not the injustice of this world. It's not war or famine. It's not the evils of perversion. The darkest of all works of the enemy is religion. Because it looks so much like good fruit, yet it is deadly poison. To do the works of the kingdom, and yet our hearts are filled with poison, can be a very possible thing. Jesus says that we will know them. But I think that, as I said before, it's not just about you and I being a fruit inspector. But here's what I want to say to you this morning. It's not just to know who they are, I think, but to understand this type of approach to God is what it is. Why? Why do I need to understand this type of approach to God, this approach of religion to God? Why do I need to understand that? So I can guard my own heart and mind to prevent myself from slipping into this trap of religion, because my propensity is that of a sinful nature, and I can fall into this trap myself as well. And so that's what he's teaching. He's not just saying to you and I here, I want you to know who these people are, and I think that's part of it. Yes, that is definitely part of that. But also it's speaking to my own heart, your heart, and the person next to you's heart as well, to say to you, for you to be careful, to understand what this approach looks like, so you don't find yourself at some point in your walk with God slipping into this approach of religion toward God, is what he's saying. Because it's more than being a fruit inspector, but to know my own heart and where it stands in relationship with Jesus. This is about me guarding my heart from a spirit of religion. Just doing or saying the right thing is not enough. What does that mean? It's not just what I do for the kingdom, but it's why I do it. Realize that. It's why I do it. And we're going to dig into that in a moment together as well. So he says in verse 21, here's what he says. Not everyone who says to me, and this continues. You can see how Jesus is building to get to this parable. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. So I thought about this, what he says. Not everyone who says. And they use the word Lord. It's actually the Greek word Kyros, and what this word means is it means Lord, but it also means God. It's an identity. So what they understood about God is correct. They know who he is. They know that he is God. What does that mean for us, Mark? Because these are people that go to church and they volunteer and they give as well. They serve in leadership. This is not just some random statement. Jesus is being very specific here is what he's doing. So what are you saying, Mark? Then I should just stop all the things that I'm doing when I volunteer, right? That's what I should do. Just resign from everything. Now all the ministry leaders are sitting in the room are really nervous, right? Because all of a sudden you're going to have this mass resignation of everybody that's doing things with you for the kingdom's sake. No, that's not what he's saying at all. He's asking the question, why are you doing it? What's behind you? What's behind that? What's in your heart? Why are you doing these things? He's addressing something, I think, even deeper for our lives. Is it for your own value? Look, or for his glory alone? That's a huge question, isn't it? Because they're saying to him, Lord, Lord. It's a term of endearment that they would repeat publicly about Jesus. So is the problem the manner in which they're addressing him? No. Isn't this a proper verbal confession? Absolutely. And we should confess him as Lord. That's not what he's teaching. There's more to this relationship with him than words. Realize this. This language of confession, it's essential to our salvation, but it's not the essence of our salvation experience. But it's the work of the gospel in our heart that transforms our lives. Romans chapter 10, let me share this with you. Just to show you this, it says in verse 8, but what does it say? The Lord is near to you in your mouth and in your heart. And you can read the rest of it later. In your mouth and in your heart. There's more to this than just words, but it's righteousness based on faith and not just a mantra, not just things that you're saying. Jesus is building this out for you and I. He's talking to us in this room this morning. It's a warning that we should heed as well. A warning to those times when my words are superficial and not a work of my heart and transformed living. But look what he says in verse 22. He says, on that day, again, another end time statement, right? That is the day of judgment. He's saying, on that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, these are powerful words. I think you just have to sit in this for a moment. I never knew you. I never knew you, he said. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. He says you can prophesy. He says you can cast out demons. You can do miracles. These are bona fide works, is what they are. And still not know me. I want to show you how weighty this is, these words that Jesus speaks to us in these verses here, because I think it's powerful. Because in verse 23, he doesn't just imply this, but he speaks this. He says, depart from me. It is a statement of separation. And I don't think we can quite wrap our mind around what this is like to be separated from Jesus, because we have never experienced that in this life, that he is always with us. He is omnipresent. He is always here in this life for us, that we've never experienced that. It is so terrible. It's so frightening. It's so fearful. It is so traumatic that is something that we will never experience in this life, only after this life. But he says there will come a day when that terrible, tragic thing will happen in the lives of those that don't have a relationship with me outside of just the words that they're speaking. He's saying that there will be a separation from him. He's saying to you and I, there's more to this walk with him than just a mantra, just the words that we speak. So you have two trees, both bearing fruit. But where we get this, I think, turned around is the difference that we make, and Jesus makes here, between that of a relationship and religion. Because in a relationship, it is the tree that gives life and essence to the fruit. But in a approach to God of religion, it is the fruit that is attempting to give life and essence to the tree. Do you see the difference? That is the difference in the two. You and I know that this does not work in the natural world. It just doesn't work. It is not the fruit that gives essence and life to that of the tree, but it works the other way around. And it does not work in the spiritual world as well. And those are the things that Jesus is addressing to this crowd as he speaks this to them that day as well. And that's why he says, this is so important that you get this. I take this so seriously that there will be a moment that if you choose to live this kind of life continually, he says, then you will be separated from me, is what he's saying. Look at verse 24. Here's the parable. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand, and the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. So here's what he's saying, and this is where we end this morning. He's saying, be cautious of poor teaching and poor hearing. Because he starts out telling us about that of false prophets is what he's doing. So be careful of poor teaching. But then he goes into that of poor hearing as well. He says, if you hear, but yet you don't do, then this is what is going to happen as well. Here's what he's saying. It's just as dangerous. It's just as dangerous this morning to hear the words of Jesus and not do them as it is to hear the words of a false prophet and to follow their teaching, is what he's saying. And if you read through this short sermon, this Sermon on the Mount, you see that he continually compares two groups of people. But as I read through this, what I realized is they're not necessarily good people versus bad people. No. In fact, if you go back and look at even preceding verses or preceding chapters, it's not even talking about people that pray and people that don't pray. He even says in Matthew chapter 6, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites. They pray also, he was saying. So what I realize is this, that everybody's praying and everybody's given to the poor here and everybody's keeping the commandments. Both are teaching, both are producing fruit. And I think that's where this becomes very muddy for you and I. And we struggle with this for a moment. Because the comparison here is not necessarily good versus bad, but it's clearly religious versus relationship. I think it's why they're doing what they're doing, and not just what they're doing that Jesus is addressing. Because it's not the fruit, again, that makes the tree healthy, but yet it is that of the tree that sustains the fruit and multiplies it. It's the heart. It's the heart long before it's the hands, is what he's saying. But here's where I end this morning, verse 15. Here's what he says. He says, we go back, we've read it already, but I want to go there. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves, he says. Are ravenous wolves. And as I researched this text, what I realized that the translators struggled with this text. There are many texts that our translators struggled with, from that of the Greek Septuagint to this is what we have today. And they struggle with the meaning here, so they chose a word because it related to the animal that Jesus spoke of, and that was a wolf. And so they chose the word ravenous. But if you look at the word in the Greek that was used there, it translates even to another word, I think even more accurately, and it translates to the word extortioner. I thought it was interesting. Same word for blackmailer, is what he says. I think it explains more accurately this spiritual approach to God. This religious approach to God. Because it's again, as I look through this, it's not necessarily a teaching about good people versus bad people, but what I realize that it's a search. It's a search for inward value and worth through what you do. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to bear these fruit. And then you're going to recognize the fruit that's hanging from the tree. And you're going to see that I'm a good person. And so I find my value in what I do, and not the value set on me by my Redeemer. And that is an approach to God that God is addressing here. It's an endless search for value and worth and fulfillment in your life, because it looks a lot like good fruit. But Jesus said in the end, though, it's poisonous, it's destructive, it doesn't bring life to you or to anyone else around you. Can I get personal? I'm just waiting for the day that you say no, right? Yeah, but no, I want to get personal. It's why, and I've been here, it's why some of you get angry when you're doing good, because you feel like it's unnoticed. Because what you're doing is you're drawing value from what you do, and not from the value that Christ has placed upon you and within you. Sitting in this room this morning, people who bear fruit because they want to be valued by those around them. I think that's why the word extortion works so well here. Yet you fail to see the value that your Redeemer has placed upon your life, that God has placed upon your life through that of giving his son, Jesus. I'm not debating with you this morning that we don't all have this need for being valued. And I understand that. And I have that. You have that. If you deny that, then you are denying the truth I think we all have that within us. The question, I think, for us in this room this morning is that where are you seeking to find it? In what you do, in your works, in where you volunteer? Because these same folks that Jesus is talking to, they prayed, they fed the poor, they did those things. But yet I think many times for some of them it was a search for something that God had already established. Their own value and their own worth. Are you seeking for it in the works or in a relationship with Jesus? I think sometimes we even try to blackmail God, right? So God, here's the things I've done for you. I mean, that's what they did, right? So God, here's the things I've done for you. We've prophesied in your name, God, and we've cast out demons, and we've done mighty works in your name. So God, you owe me. So God, you owe me. And God, you're not paying up right now. My life is just like not going well, right? And things are not adding up right now, God. And I prayed for these things, and I have not seen them in my life. So God, you owe me for these because of the things that I have done. Can I tell you, that's a heretical teaching of a modern day movement in faith today, which is poison. It's poison. God does not owe you anything. But I think we always have to add the next part of that statement, because he has already given you everything. And that of his son Jesus. What more could he give you? What a more value could he give you than that? What Jesus is teaching us is that there are two ways to approach him. And one is relationship and one is religion. And if I'm approaching him through religion, and that is saying, God, I've done all these things. God, haven't you noticed me over here? And I warrant, God, you now doing something for me. That doesn't sound a lot like relationship. That sounds a lot like blackmail. And Jesus says, wait, stop where you are. Because there are two ways that you can approach me. And it comes down to this. Are you building your house on the rock, and that is me and this relationship with me? Or are you building your house on sand, which is religion, and you're trying to get to me your way? Because religion might make you feel good for a moment, but it is short-lived. The result is emptiness this morning. It's like trying to hold sand in your hand. Have you ever tried that when you go to the beach? That you can hold it for a moment, but eventually it starts sifting through your fingers and you lose it. Two trees, two houses, two approaches to God. Relationship built on the rock, and that is him. Or religion built on sand. Oh. I think it's very easy to hear this and to dismiss yourself from it. And I love how Jesus builds out a parable. That he builds out a parable in a way that does not leave us an escape route from it. It touches all of our hearts. It brings us to this place of being, oh, there's the word thunderstruck, right? Yeah, that's it. It challenges us and encourages us. I love it the way Jesus puts this together, because he calls us out in those moments of religion in our life where we are, love me through this, right? but where we are extorting God. And then he says, but here's why this is happening in your life. Because you failed to see the value that I placed upon you, the worth I've placed upon you. And that's enough. Two trees. Fruits look from the outside very much similar. Yet one brings life, the other brings death. So I want to say to you that, somebody saw me in the lobby after first service and they were leaving. And the thing is to say, hey, great sermon, great teaching this morning. And I'm not saying that to you to say that to me. That's not the point, right? But they say that to me. I don't know. And, the whole time they're trying to get out the door and I'm blocking the door, right? And so they said, man, but I just don't know. I'm just kind of scared about whatever I do now. It's frightening, about this thing. I said, that's not what Jesus is saying to you and I. That if this starts with your heart, if this starts with you building this relationship on the value that God has already spoken over you, then you can rest in the understanding and the assurance that what's behind what you're doing is pure. That's what I told him. But there are those moments. Let's just be real, okay? Right? There's moments of frustration. God, I've done all these things for you. And I've sacrificed all these things for you. And God, you owe me. We may not say those words, but we feel that. We feel that at times. And if I've stepped away from the value that God has placed over me, and I understand the worth that's been established as me being his child, then that's where I go. But when I come back to this place, where I say, God, it's your grace and your mercy, the gospel in my life, and what you've done for me in my life. And when I sit in that for a moment, then I come back to those moments and say, God, forgive me. Because God, whether you never do another thing, right? Then God, you've done everything I need in sending your son, Jesus. But God is saying, hey, there's two ways to approach me. Check your heart. Check your heart. Because you just can't get a pass by saying, God, I'm doing the right things. That's not the pass. What you need to be asking is, God, why do I do these things? Why am I doing this? Is it for me and my value and worth, or is it for your glory alone? So can I pray with you for a moment? Pray with you and pray for you. So, Father, here we are as your kids. God, you know everything about us. So, Lord, we're not going to sit here and pretend that we have not dealt with these kinds of feelings in our life or even said these things. Because, God, not only do you know our works, but you know the heart behind those things in our life. And you know the moments where we are functioning in pure motivation, and you know the moments where we are functioning in pure motivation. And God, we're so thankful that you are with us in the days we get it right and in the days we get it wrong. But yet, God, there has to be this moment in all of our lives where we check our own hearts. Let that begin today. Speak to us today, Father. Because it does matter how we live in this life. And so, Father, right now we open our hearts to the power of your Spirit, to encourage and to convict, to challenge us, to take a familiar story to some in this room and to remove the dust and to feel the effects of it again. Thank you, Father, for challenging us to become the person that you've designed us to be. There are two ways to approach you, Lord. The question is, where are we this morning? Where are we? Thank you, Father. Speak to us today in your name. Amen.
Hey, thanks for joining us today and spending this time with us. Before you leave, would you take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel or go on Facebook and comment there so that more people have the opportunity to hear this message. Also, if you'd like to further engage, go to our website at hopeandanderson.com and subscribe to our newsletter as well. We'd love to see you on campus sometime. Our services are at 9 and 11 a.m. and we would love to have you here in person. So again, thanks for your time and have a great day.